1 Samuel 17 1-18-20, through the Bible. Chapters 17-18. Theme: God trains David. Chapter 17 is one of the most familiar in the Bible. This wonderful episode of David and Goliath reveals more than human bravery. It reveals that, even as a boy, David had a heart for God. He didn't volunteer to fight the giant because his people were being shamed, but because Goliath was defying the armies of the living God. As he faced his formidable foe, he testified to his faith in God. "Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied." 1 Samuel 17:45. David slays Goliath, giant of Gath. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochoh, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shochoh and Azekah, in Ephes Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. 1 Samuel 17 1-2. Israel is at war again with the Philistines, their perennial and perpetual enemy. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. 1 Samuel 17:3. These two armies were at a standstill. They were poised to enter the battle and did not want to fight. It was similar to Israel's present conflict. At the Suez Canal, Israel is on one side and Egypt is on the other. Well, here are the Philistines on one mountain, Israel is on the other mountain, with a valley between. The Philistines are the aggressors. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath, of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had an helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. 1 Samuel 17 4-5. If a cubit is 18 inches, Goliath was a pretty tall man. Since one span is about 9 inches, Goliath was about 9 feet, 9 inches tall. He was a big boy. He could have played center or forward on any basketball team. Certainly these soldiers wanted to put the decision of the battle in the hands of Goliath and one Israelite. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And one bearing a shield went before him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. 1 Samuel 17 7-8. Every day Goliath challenged the Israelites to send out a man to fight him, but, after 40 days, no one had accepted. David came on the scene because he had brought food to his brothers who were serving in the army. David was alarmed that no one would accept the challenge. His brothers tried to send him home, but David would not go. When Saul heard that David would go against Goliath, he tried to put his armor on him. David, however, was just a boy. He said, I can't fight with these because I haven't tested them. I will just have to fight with the equipment I'm used to. What a lesson there is for us in this. Let's not try to be something we are not, or try to do something we are really not called to do. If God has called you to use a slingshot, friend, don't try to use a sword. If God has called you to speak, then speak. If God has called you to do something else, well, do that. If God has called you to sing, sing. But if He has not called you to sing, for goodness sake, don't do it. Too many people are trying to use a sword when the slingshot is really more their size. And he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. 1 Samuel 17:40. Some people believe that David chose 5 smooth stones so that if he missed his first shot, he could use one or all of the others. David did not intend to miss, friend. Then why did he select 5 stones? The answer is found in 2 Samuel 21:22. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath, and fell by the hand of David, and by the hand of his servants. Goliath had 4 sons, and David was sure they would come out when he killed their father. This is why David picked up 5 stones. That was the number he needed. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord sabbath not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. 1 Samuel 17:45-47. You know the rest of the story. It is so familiar. God gave David the victory, and he killed Goliath. The battle was the Lord's, and the giant was delivered into David's hands. There are many great spiritual lessons in this chapter. For example, the giant represents the world, Saul, I think, represents Satan, and David represents the believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. We are admonished, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. 1 John 2:15. We are in the world but not of it. What a difference there is between David and Samson. Samson treated the Philistines as friends, he even married one of them. David treated Goliath as an enemy. The world system, the cosmos, which includes all governments, educational programs, and entertainments, is the enemy of the believer today. The interesting thing is that David's faith enabled him to go out to meet the giant and defeat him. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world, and this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. 1 John 5:4. It is the same lesson Joshua learned at Jericho. He found out that the battle is the Lord's. David also learned that he could not use the weapons of this world to fight the battle. He had to use his own weapons, his own methods, those in which God had schooled him. The believer today needs to recognize that the world can be overcome only by his faith and confidence in God. David and Jonathan make a covenant. And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. 1 Samuel 18:1. David was speaking to Saul. Saul had called David after the battle because he wanted to give him recognition for his deed. I think Saul felt that he gave him too much recognition in light of what happened later. As Jonathan, Saul's son, stood there listening as David and his father talked, the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. The relationship of these two men was quite wonderful. We often speak about the love of a man for a woman, and that is wonderful, but nothing is as fine and noble as the love of two men for each other. They see in each other a mirror of themselves and are drawn together. Two men can be real friends. They can enjoy athletics and recreation together. They can work together and have a social life together. Jonathan was an outstanding man, as we have seen, and he loved David for his courage and his confidence in God. And Saul took him that day, and would let him go no more home to his father's house. 1 Samuel 18:2. David now becomes a public figure, and he will occupy that position for the rest of his life. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. 1 Samuel 18:3. The covenant that these two men made was that they would stick together. It is difficult to find another friendship equal to what these men had. There is nothing quite like it. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and to his girdle. 1 Samuel 18:4. David was a peasant boy, and he did not have the clothes befitting his new public life. Jonathan shared his wardrobe with David. It was a very generous thing to do. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely, and Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. 1 Samuel 18:5. David had that charisma that we hear so much about, which made him accepted by the public. David was actually a great man. God looked on his heart, the people are looking at the outside, and David looked good both on the inside and on the outside. Of course David was not sinless, as we shall see, but he had a real heart for God, and people loved him for it. And it came to pass as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul, with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him, and he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands, and what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day and forward. 1 Samuel 18:6-9. Saul did not like the new song that the women were singing. Saul became jealous of David because of the people's applause and acceptance of him. As the story progresses, Saul will attempt to remove him from the limelight by actually destroying him. As David becomes the favorite of the people, he begins to see that Saul is not as friendly as he once was. And it came to pass on the morrow, that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house, and David played with his hand, as at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand. 1 Samuel 18:10. This is quite a dramatic scene. As David is playing on a harp, and Saul is sitting over there playing with a javelin, David may have guessed what he had in mind. He may have hit a sour note or two, I don't know, but suddenly Saul threw the javelin. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice, 1 Samuel 18:11. Saul wanted to get rid of David permanently. David dodged the javelin and then departed. He took French leave, got out of the palace and the area as quickly as he could. Wherefore when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them, 1 Samuel 18:15-16. David marries Michal, Saul's daughter. David is now the one who is being accepted by the nation. Saul has been wondering how he can trap him and finally decides upon a clever method. He promises David his daughter Merab for his wife on the condition that he continue to war with the Philistines, hoping he will be killed in battle. Then he fails to keep faith with David and gives Merab to another. Now we will see that he wants to give his younger daughter to David. Why? That would put David in the family where Saul could get to him any time he wanted to. I do not believe David ever loved Michal. We blame David for having several marriages, but he certainly got off to a bad start with this girl. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him, 1 Samuel 18:20. It says here that Michal loved David, but it was not that marital love that is needed to make a success of marriage. In the beginning it was that love of the hero and his popularity. The day will come when she will ridicule him and despise him for his enthusiasm for God.